educators in general in terms of what ought to be done in agriculture development. I had the privilege of serving with Dr. Deaton in BIFAD as a member of BIFAD, and I can tell you that he not only brings a wealth of experience and expertise, but he is just an incredibly good leader. You know, sometimes you hear about people herding cats, and he does that very, very well. And implemented the programs really of Feed the Future, which, as you all know, is the umbrella program that the project that USAID has been implementing in many places around the world have been spearheaded by that initiative. He is an incredible mind in the world of agricultural development or development in general. He has really spearheaded a lot of efforts all around the world. He's a great professional and understands, he gets very much the Land-Grant University system and the strength that we bring to agricultural development. So without further ado, let me bring Dr. Deaton to the front so he can give you his presentation, and then Dr. Bertram will follow. Let's welcome both of them.
Dr. Marano, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. If I falter, raise your hand. It's wonderful to be here, and I can say so many good things about Elsa Marano, who worked with us on the board, BIFAD, and that I was honored to chair. And of course, we all had worked with Dr. Bertram. So we're very thrilled to be here together. And I want to commend Elsa and her leadership at the Borlaug Institute to honoring a man whom we all know that all of us feel like we walk in his shadows and laud him in so many ways. And I had the privilege as chancellor at the University of Missouri to present him with an honorary degree on a very hot day in May. And he was a soldier in every aspect of that, as Elsa was telling me about his role here as well when he got his degree. So it's a wonderful time to be here, to be with you. And as I said to a group of students just a few minutes ago, it cannot be a more exciting time to be engaged in agricultural development work when we have a population growing to 9 billion people by 2050, and the demand on the whole agricultural system to step up and respond by increasing at least the estimate. You get 60% at the minimum, I think. A lot of people say it's got to be double because of the growth in the demand for protein products that this is all going to feed into. And we know it depends a lot on peace in the world as well. So we're very committed to doing everything possible. And I work then as chair of BIFAD, advise USAID administration, and work with Dr. Bertram in so many ways. And I want to take a few minutes to go over that. I'm going to try not to rush, but I'm not going to read everything that you see on the slides here, if I can get those moving forward. Which way do I point? Maybe that's the...
There's another one. There's another one over here. Oh, there you go.
Maybe that's... Is it? Let me say, I'm happy to actually...
I'll tell you what, I'll be happy to advance it for you. You just
Oh,
do
the
the
map?
next, and I'll do
Okay.
it.
Or you want to show me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take care of
Okay.
it. I'll take care of it.
Here we are. What is BIFAD? And let me say, having been involved in agricultural development as an ag economist, Peace Corps, and other work, and working in several countries in Africa, the Caribbean area, and in Asia, where I started out in the Peace Corps in Thailand, it's just wonderful to be honored to be in the role of chair of BIFAD. In a nutshell, what the basic message I want to give to you in the next 10 minutes here is that our entire goal as BIFAD is to bring the wealth of information, and that means science and knowledge, that base to bear on what the United States does in its foreign assistance efforts. And that's because that's our mandate, growing out of the legislation that Paul Finley, a congressman from Abraham Lincoln's district, I think this is I never thought of it that way, actually, until recently. From Abraham Lincoln's district, as you all know, 1862, the Morrill Act. I don't need to go over that. You're a group of seasoned experts here. But it's from that district that Paul Finley, as a congressman, and Hubert Humphrey from Minnesota created Title 12 that created BIFAD to have a group of 7 people advise the USAID administration to ensure that our experience with the land grant mission, bringing knowledge, teaching people, bringing that back into the labs, would shape the way we do foreign policy, so that we not only, that we in fact do not just provide foreign assistance in the way of providing food to other people around the world, but we don't provide the fish, we teach them how to fish. You've heard the metaphor so many times. But that is so vital. And it's frankly, it's so easy for any administration responding to short-term demands to move away from that. So what we do is to take a longer-term perspective, and fortunately, Administrator Shaw, Rod Shaw of USAID, has asked us as BIFAD to advise him on all aspects of the aid mission, not just the focus, which I will talk more about today, the focus on Feed the Future countries, those 19 target countries right now that we're focusing on trying to alleviate extreme poverty in the world and reduce child stunting. These are major objectives, and promote agricultural growth and development among smallholders. So a very refined aspect of what USAID is doing that is so vital as we move into the future. There's many ways of tackling the global food issue. It's very brave to say you're really going to lift up the lowest of the low in this process and engage them in the commercial economy of the world and move them forward. The good thing is we've had progress for the last decade in a way that we have never seen progress before in the history of humankind, modern history, recorded history of humankind, and that's really very, very important. So the president appoints the 7 persons. 4 are linked with higher education. 1 has to represent the private sector, and 1 has to represent the NGOs at a minimum. So that makes up one way or the other than the 7 with a little overlap sometimes here and there. And so we move forward. We can go ahead here. Right now, and I've already said this in a way, but inclusive agricultural sector growth is focused upon at the same time that improved nutritional status for particularly pregnant, lactating mothers and small children. That first 300 plus days of the child's existence is so vital to ensure that we are not saddling society with an even greater cost to try to deal with the problems that arise. And that concept is common to an economist. It isn't in our lay thinking too much, but we need it planted out there. Many examples of that. So BIFAD tries to back off and take that broader perspective. Someone asked a question about this earlier. The countries were selected because of the great need, the poverty in those countries, because there was an opportunity for partnership, both with the country represented, the governance bodies, and the NGOs, and the private sector, all of whom are involved in what we do. There's potential for growth, there's the potential for regional linkages, as we're seeing a lot of, particularly in East Africa and in Southern Africa, but East Africa particularly, I think, has been extremely strong in linking in the Roof Forum kind of agenda and the governments across Southern Africa working together to achieve change. We know that, and we believe that, following sort of the Title 12 grassroots model that our land-grant universities were developed on, that it takes local commitment and local resources to get the job done. So we're always looking for that to drive productivity in our agricultural development programs. So BIFAD is working directly with USAID, reaching out to all the universities, also to the CGIAR system and other elements that Dr. Bertram will talk more about. Also, this partnership among all, every way possible to ensure that what represents the United States' best development efforts is fed by the absolute best knowledge available in the world. And that may be to say the obvious, But it's like I've always said to all my doctoral students, particularly, who said, well, you know, I want to go this way or that way because so-and-so at another university knows more about it. And I said, how could they know more? All knowledge is available right now in the library and through social media today and through the systems of exchange we have professionally. There is no excuse for not doing our best in every aspect of what we do internationally. And that's the commitment BIFAD brings to the challenge. And we're addressing, of course, a huge complex issue. As we look at meeting this 2050 kind of objective, we've got climate change plaguing us in so many ways. And we know that unless we address the food issue, we will have conflict facing us in so many. It was well documented in the 2007 and 8 price rise that everybody was blamed for, right? From ethanol all the way to climate change, and there's a mix of all that that led to the price increases. There was documented 30 plus changes in violent changes in governments as a result of that food price spiral occurring. Because food is really the numeraire, as we say in economics. It's what determines the wage rate that's acceptable and whether you can survive with your family. And if food rises above that, people will go to the streets before they will let their families starve to death. So if you think of that writ large, that explains so much of the violence that occurred in 2007, 8, particularly the Arab Spring. As I say, this is documented in foreign affairs journals that we have published in. So we try to foster that culture of excellence, continuous learning, drawing on all forms of higher education, new technologies, new ways of training. And you know, here at the Borlaug Institute, I was so impressed with what you're doing in so many of these areas. This is what we want to see in a major way with training. And we focus so much on human and institutional capacity development because we have got to find ways of creating that sustainable capacity for human development and scientific knowledge to be generated in the various countries of the world where we are. That partnership is vital. You're engaged in it in so many ways. And we could talk about the details, but that message has got to be there. It's very, very important. And all the PBOs or NGOs that we work with, all the international agencies that we work with, we have to be holding them accountable also to these standards to ensure that we are getting the best job done. And there's so much need and so little to invest in it. We can't waste any money in this process. So we want the linkages from the university to the university abroad, working through USAID. Go ahead. And let me say, one thing that BIFAD does is commission major studies, drawing on people from universities and from all these sectors we've talked about. And Dr. Marano was very much involved in the visitation study in Haiti, for example, when I first came on, a study that continues to have legs. And I was telling her last night, I have channeled it specifically into a number of areas where it's really made a major difference already in some of the developments that are occurring and will continue to as we look to the future. And we commissioned, I'll mention quickly 2 other studies. We undertook a study that led to the change from the CRISP system to the innovation labs. We went from, I think it was 10 CRISPs to 24 innovation labs, and you're familiar with that, and Dr. Bertram will say more about that, I know, to some extent later. And then after that occurred, BIFAD advised the USAID administration at that time, because in our university work, we had seen multiple disciplines being brought together in creative ways, creating synergy, creating new knowledge as a very key to what we were doing in improving our ability to promote agricultural development. So we said, you've got these various CRISPs out there, and this was consistent with his own observation also. Let's take the key elements we're learning in nutrition, in water, and various types of resource management, plant genetics, and let's make sure they're talking to each other across the different CRISPs, or now innovation labs. So now that continues to be a very important theme in what we are doing with the innovation labs. Always trying to get key knowledge, bringing it together. And so there's a real dynamic. It's like multiple departments working toward a common goal. So that's something that the BIFAD firmly believes in and continues to advocate. Then we also just are completing now a major study on how we can improve our capacity to work with universities abroad and with other forms of educational programs. And so that when students come from those countries to study, first of all, we need more resources for more students to come here from various countries around the world that we're targeting to study for master's and doctoral degrees. But then when they go back, we need to have the capacity to maintain a close partnership with them and provide some support, provide the ability for them to continue to grow professionally, engage in joint efforts. The Australians have been very good about this in Southeast Asia, let me say, and I've observed that in my work in Southeast Asia. And we feel that certainly in Africa with these Feed the Future countries, we need to ensure that capacity. That study will be discussed at the World Food Conference next week. Some of you will be there. And we will have then an e-consultation through the fall, and we'll be formulating various strategies that are based on three major studies that have been done on human institutional capacity development over the past couple of years. One at USDA, one at USAID, and then this study that BIFAD undertook. The universities, of course, I'm going to quickly, also this one and the next one. In other words, who benefits from all this? Certainly USAID benefits because they get the greatest knowledge. They expand the resources of USAID into universities and other agencies of government, into the NGO community, beyond what they might do without BIFAD. BIFAD, of course, and universities like Texas A&M benefit because you enrich your curriculum. You open up new vistas of opportunity for your professionals, your faculty to contribute to what's going on in the world. It contributes then to the strength of Texas agriculture, as it certainly does Missouri agriculture. If you talk to members of your economic development cabinet, your state government, you'll see them embrace what you're doing internationally very strongly because it's those markets that are growing and creating the potential. If you look back at 30, 40, 50 years of history, if the case is so clear that it almost doesn't bear mentioning. If you look at the growth of a South Korea, the growth of a Thailand for that matter, the growth of India, these countries that have been so successful economically, creating enormous demand for U.S. food and non-food products. Our entire economy has been lifted up because of our aid effort in a major way. Research will continue to be focused on enabling smallholders, particularly in the complex environment they work in, we will make the kind of development investments and research investments that strengthens the ability of small farmers to develop markets, to use mobile devices, to check prices, communicate with each other, form cooperatives, and engage in a variety of ways to strengthen themselves in the economy. And there's various enabling environments the various organizations are working with that can help strengthen this. This Ag Innovation System, I've basically already mentioned it in what I said. This is a more detailed look at those components. And I won't go into examples here in favor of time and giving us time for adequate discussion here, but I've basically said this. I know that USAID now is focusing on 5 basic levers in what they do, and promoting entrepreneurship, utilizing policy and data very effectively to measure change and to promote the kind of strategies among the various actors. We're not taking a simplistic view, and to be honest, I can remember when both World Bank and USAID and universities took a much more simplistic view. We said, well, we will do that and it'll have these positive effects and we'll go on. Now we're very carefully crafting the way we measure every aspect of the interaction because it enables us to save on money and do a more effective job and on the outcomes. So a lot of time spent on measurement is vital and it strengthens all of us. So that's a lot of the research and innovation. Promoting private sector linkages is very vital. And in country after country, the big challenge that we face is how do we deal with the whole extension question? Extension is one of the great strengths of our university system in this country and one of the most lacking vibrant resources in country after country abroad. So a big topic, we could go into it in great depth, but it's one that we're spending more time thinking about. I've mentioned the innovation labs already. It involves 60 colleges and universities. Everyone competes for these, and some of them look at various value chains that are occurring around the commodity or mix of commodities they're working with. And then many of them leverage additional resources from the private sector and NGOs to achieve their work. And I know you're doing that here at the Borlaug Institute as well. I think I would just emphasize here the importance of integrating the projects. This goes back to why we created the innovation labs in a sense, or why USAID created them, better said. And BIFAD was really an outside observer, but we did the study. And it showed that there were gaps in knowledge that we shouldn't have had we had the labs working together. That's the bottom line here. And I in May, excuse me, in May, I participated in a workshop in Athens, and with the Grain Legume Innovation Lab. And there, it was amazing that there was we discovered as we met there that there's a real lack of knowledge about traditional seed systems in country after country. How long could you keep using the same seed without it diminishing in quality or disease setting in, right? Obvious kind of questions that if we went around the room, most of you would say, yeah, we got to look at that. Well, this group wasn't looking at that question. And then when it talks about it, they say, oh yeah, we ought to do some meta research on that to take that step because it's vital to the next investment you would make. And that's not being critical of anyone. It's saying that any place you look almost, we're so in depth in what we're doing that we forget to piece things together so we get a more strategic sense of how we can make investments and then make them pay off for development. Synergies among all this is so vital, not only for what I have already said, but particularly the nutritional aspect. I just simply want to emphasize that and emphasize the access to capital because questions have come up on that. Looking at how agriculture is as vital part of the nutrition system begins to change the way you think about what smallholders are doing. If they can feed their families and improve the nutrition, you get a gain on the human side and therefore less public costs. I keep emphasizing that. And you get more vibrant, healthy people to do the job as we look to the future. And finding new ways of financing this. You know, some of you know Thomas Piketty's recent book that looked at the distribution of income, and it says we're growing more and more unequal, right? Capital for the 21st century. But in that book, he basically, I'm not being overly critical of him because he wasn't looking at poor people, but basically poor don't have any capital, so I don't have to worry about that. Well, in fact, poor do have capital. We've discovered everywhere we look among smallholders, their ability to accumulate capital and make it work for their small farm usually makes a difference of whether they succeed, whether they can send their children to college. And I could give you dozens of examples like this from my own observations around the world. So you do not want to ignore that capital formation and innovative financing systems with microfinance or money lenders in various ways, cooperatives working with the banks in that country to generate more financial ability for the household to make a longer term view of what it is they're doing. I'm sorry, I was very time conscious here. Also, I apologize for that, but I did want to give time. We want to have a good discussion with you on these. Thanks for this opportunity, and I will turn the program over to my colleague.
Thank you very much. While Gabe gets set up here, I want to encourage you to start thinking of questions you may have for both of these gentlemen. The theme for today is really for us to try to discern from them where they think all of this that has been building up is going. What is the next phase, if you will, of the work that needs to be done in agricultural development around the world. We do have this incredible grand challenge of feeding 9 billion by the year 2050. And there's lots of very smart people working on this. But all those smart people also take the lead and need the resources that are provided by USAID to attack some of these problems. There's lots of other sources as well, but certainly an important one is USAID. And so we're delighted to have Dr. Bertram here as a chief scientist who can talk science to us and the science of ag development and where it's going.
Thank you so much, Elsa. It's great to be here among old friends and new. And I'm going to try to go quickly. So Brady's already alluded to this. And I'll tell you the truth, I could have put that slide up 10 years ago. And was anybody investing in agriculture? No, it was because of the changes that Brady talked about, the price rises that led to civil instability that put agriculture back front and center. I just want to make three comments. One is those prices were not a spike. They have stayed high, much higher than prices were in 2006, and the work coming out of IFPRI and elsewhere suggests that they're going to remain high. Second, a lot of what we saw was really about underlying growth in demand associated with the income effect in countries like China and India, wherever middle classes are emerging and shifting to more cereal-based diets with livestock, dairy, chicken, eggs. And third, investment in agricultural R&D had fallen off, as many of you know from painful experience in the last 20 years. And so we weren't keeping up. Productivity growth on a linear basis, it was linear, but that linear basis was becoming a smaller and smaller piece each year because the underlying level of production was getting larger. So we had to turn that around. And so the United States government, along with partners, launched Feed the Future. Just 3 quick points. It's country-led. If our partners don't think it's worth investing in, we shouldn't either. If it's going to be sustainable, they have to own it. Second thing, value chains. It's all about making the economic linkages, again, that Dr. Deaton referred to. And third, there's a strong science and technology focus, which I'm very grateful for. And I really want to credit Dr. Rajiv Shah, the administrator of USAID, for pushing that so strongly. So it's not just about production if we're talking about sustainable intensification. We're going to be measured at the end of the day in terms of reductions in poverty and reductions in stunting in children under 2. That's an incredibly high bar for agricultural investments. So we take a smallholder focus, and that's a challenge. We use existing and new technologies. We've got to get the policy environment right so that investment both on the farm and off the farm will flow. And we work across a whole spectrum of areas, from all the way from information through genetic technologies, natural resource management, policy, markets, and very importantly, human capacity development and institutional capacity development. So in our research strategy, which is at the whole of government level, I want to emphasize that, Feed the Future's whole of government, but USAID said, okay, we got to advance productivity, we're going to transform systems, and we're going to enhance nutrition and food safety. How are we going to do it? So we have 3 long-term, I guess I have to say, we have 3 long-term research programs there at the top. Climate resilient cereals, productive legumes, very much because of the nutrition angle, but also because of the soil fertility and also the value, and often women manage legumes. And then third, in the middle, advanced approaches to diseases and pests of both livestock and crops. And I see Linda Logan here, she knows about that, Neville Clark knows about that. How the United States, even though we may not have some of these diseases, we have the technology. So we don't do cassava here, but we can work with the Danforth Center in St. Louis to put the best biotechnology to bear on solving disease problems in that crop. Then at the bottom of the slide are the medium-term efforts that are more the policy and markets research and support analysis, the safe and nutritious foods, which very much emphasizes both animal source foods, but also, seeing Fred Davies here, the high nutrition foods, vegetables, fruits. So we're trying to get at that mix as well and support dietary improvement. And then finally, the human and institutional capacity building. And where does it all come together? It comes in that center circle that we call sustainable intensification. And we have focused on 4 areas of the world where these systems, where the poor and hungry live. And remember that the poor and hungry in the developing world, the great majority of them depend on agriculture one way or another. It's very ironic, but it's the case. And it's not intuitive for a lot of people who are not in our field. Okay, so I want to say a bit more about sustainable intensification. So we're trying to work in this smallholder context. We're looking at precipitation use efficiency. We're integrating legumes. We're trying to get more crop cover, crop rotation. Where we can, we integrate perennial crops, like, for example, pigeon pea in parts of Africa. We're looking at nutrient cycling and improving soil fertility, conservation agriculture. These are all things that have been tremendous in our own country. But very importantly, in a smallholder, we want to integrate livestock and aquaculture where we can. This is one of the reasons we're investing in water, including the Innovation Lab here at Texas A&M on small-scale irrigation. And we want to figure out how to help smallholders mechanize. You know, drudgery is no fun. You know, a woman in a hoe is not going to feed the world in the 21st century, and it's a miserable life. Sometimes it's romantically portrayed, but it's not an easy life. So we're looking for ways to reduce drudgery. And then what about, you know, how do we get the outcomes beyond productivity or beyond the environment? What did we get to try to get at the human side? So we want, as I said, we want to reduce drudgery. We want to think about opportunities for higher income, and that could be horticultural crops for nutrition and profit, biofortified crops for nutrition, livestock again, and fish. And very much we think about gender. Women are economic agents in agriculture. They are leaders in agriculture. They are the majority of farmers in many countries. They also are critical to the child nutrition outcomes that we're trying to get, because women care for the children primarily. So thinking about how this all plays out for women and how we can try to enhance their ability to control their own decision making and control resources is very important. Then I wanted to mention climate change, because you might have heard about UNGA last week, the UN General Assembly in New York, and President Obama spoke, and Secretary Kerry and Secretary Vilsack. And Secretary Vilsack came to the launch of something called the Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. Now, we've always had climate, gender, and environment as crosscuts in Feed the Future, but the climate smart agriculture push is more about mitigation. In other words, what can we do to help make agriculture even more a part of the solution? Because remember, agriculture generates anywhere from about 18 to 29% of the global greenhouse gas burden. The larger number being when you impute the effect of land change and tropical deforestation. One thing I'd like to share with you all is some great news I heard in New York City. The rate of tropical deforestation is plummeting. This is wonderful news, and it is partly because of the efforts of people like you all and the rest of our partners that are helping to revolutionize, and the private sector. I don't want to make it all about the public sector. The revolutionize agriculture and make it more productive, so that people are less needing to go in and clear the forest to try to just make a subsistence living. I want to say a little bit about where we put sustainable intensification programs on the ground. Actually, before I leave that one, you can see, so we can think about genetic enhancement, better water management, again, irrigation coming in, but also how we manage water on the farm. And then you see the soil carbon. It's a great thing that in our area, mitigation and adaptation often go together. In other words, if you build up soil organic matter, your plants will withstand drought better, but you're also going to be sequestering carbon. So it's what we call a triple win: income gains, adaptation gains, and mitigation gains. So in terms of sustainable intensification, I just wanted to flag to you what can happen when a farmer, now this is obviously not a very poor farmer, but look at the increase in income that he has achieved by adopting some of these technologies. And these technologies greatly reduce energy consumption. They're moving towards no-till systems. They are enhancing the amount of soil organic matter, and they are really adding to incomes. Another example from Asia, where admittedly we're further along. We're farther out of the gate in Asia. There's been a longer-term history of research, and the national partners are stronger. There's more infrastructure. But here's a woman in Bangladesh who's integrated fish, and along her side her fish ponds, she's selling the big fish. She's eating the small fish. So her children are getting vitamin A and calcium. And then she's growing vegetables along the banks of the dikes and orange flesh sweet potatoes, with Dr. Davies worked with us on last year when he spent a year with us in Washington. So this is a nice example of how income and food and nutrition intake consumption can also go together. So we're not just thinking about incomes and production, we're also thinking about what happens in the household. Now, I'm here at Texas A&M. You're one of the places we look for cutting edge science. And as you see, some of these I've mentioned already. These are all areas where we are looking to both the private sector, many companies in the US, but also the US university community to help us leverage the science that American farmers enjoy and that you all use to address the problems of smallholders. And then here's an example of, and Sean was the plant breeder with us this morning, and maybe there's some other plant breeders. This is what the kinds of things we can think about to use modern science to affect that smallholder, whether we're talking about heat tolerance, photosynthetic efficiency, imagine the implications of that for global climate, nutritional quality, weed management, there's a whole list of things, and of course nutrient use efficiency, which again comes back to climate change. You use fertilizer more efficiently, you have less denitrification, less nitrous oxide going into the air. Don't want to leave out the animals, Linda. We're also looking at improved livestock management, new breeds using genomics. We have a new program with a couple of universities around heat tolerance in poultry and also Newcastle disease. We're working with UT El Paso on Rift Valley fever, a delivery mechanism for a vaccine for that, and vaccine development in a range of things where, again, there's a real win-win here for American agriculture. USDA loves to work with us on these things because they want to position American farmers to be out ahead. And I wanted to just flag for you the extent. Brady mentioned the 60 universities. These are our Feed the Future Innovation Labs. We've gone from 10 to 24. You can see they're a little more crowded in a few places than I'd like. I'd like to see them more spread around, but they're all done competitively. And we do have some additional programs in extension, agricultural curricula, and also a number of important, I think, capacity building programs. We call them Borlaug Fellows programs, building on the program based here that Ed runs and with UC Davis. And we're making opportunities for foreign grad students to internationalize their research here in the US. We also have a program at Purdue for American grad students to seek money to internationalize their thesis research at one of the CGIAR centers overseas or at some other national program, maybe in Brazil or India or somewhere else. So we're really trying to invest in that next generation of leaders. And finally, I just wanted to say that at the end of the day, what we need is a virtuous circle between investment in research, extension, education, and impact. And when we get that impact, we get more investment because we can make the case. So Dr. Shah is pushing all of us to how to scale technologies through what I like to call catalytic partnerships, where we're handing off the technology to the private sector. It's not about researchers becoming extension agents. It's about working strategically with partners, public, private, NGOs, to get technologies out to smallholders. So that's what we call technology scaling, and I think that is it. We got a great website. You have a tremendous wealth, and Elsa and her colleagues here who worked so closely with us in shaping this initiative. With Dr. Deaton, we're always glad to be of service, and this website's a great place to start. Thank you.